Hey guys, I'm Surbhi and once again welcome to my channel Key Differences. Today in this video tutorial I'm going to explain you the difference between movement and shift in demand curve. So friends, here we go. Friends, in this video I will tell you what is demand and what are the determinants of demand. What is demand curve? What is movement in demand curve? What are the types of movement and examples of movement in demand curve? What is shift in demand curve? What are the types of shift in demand curve and examples of shift in demand curve? Lastly, we will discuss the difference between movement and shift in demand curve. So friends, first of all we will discuss demand. Demand for a commodity is the quantity of the product which a consumer is willing to buy and he has the ability to buy it in a market during a particular period at different prices or at different income levels. Now, there are three factors that constitute an effective demand. These are desire for the product, means that is sources to buy that product, and willingness to use those means to buy that product. Now come, let's talk about the determinants of demand. There are certain factors on which the demand for a commodity is dependent, and these factors are called as determinants of demand. The first and foremost factor is price of the product. The rise in the price of a commodity will decrease the demand or the quantity purchased of that commodity. Price of related goods. Related goods are of two types: complementary goods and competing goods. Competing goods are also called as substitute products. If goods are complementary in nature, a fall in price of one good will lead to the rise in demand for other. On the other hand, if goods are competing, that is substitutes, a fall in price of one leads to the fall in quantity demanded of its substitutes. Next is income of the consumer. The higher the income of the consumer, the higher will be the spending power of the consumer, and so does the quantity demanded of a particular good. Taste and preferences of consumer. Consumers' taste and preferences changes with market trends, which affects the demand for the commodity. Consumers' expectations. Consumers' expectations with respect to future prices or supply of the commodity also increases or decreases its current demand. Suppose there is an expectation that the prices of petrol are going to be increased in future, then it is going to affect its current demand. Demand curve. To understand the term demand curve, first of all you have to understand the term demand schedule. Demand schedule is a tabular representation which indicates the price of a commodity and its corresponding quantity demanded by the consumer per unit of time. Now demand curve is a graphical representation of demand schedule. It represents the quantity demanded by the consumer at different price levels. Suppose when the price of a commodity is 10 rupees, the quantity demanded is 300 units. You can see in the figure 2. When the price of a commodity is 20 rupees, the quantity demanded is 200 units. And when the price of a commodity is 30 rupees, the quantity demanded is 100 units. So, as the price of the product increases, the quantity demanded decreases. So, the higher the price of the product, the lower will be its demand. And that is why the demand curve slopes downward, that is left to right, which indicates the inverse relationship between the quantity demanded of the commodity and its price. So, what is movement in demand curve? If the quantity demanded of a commodity increases or decreases due to the rise or fall in the prices of that commodity, there is a movement in demand curve. Now there is two types of movement in demand curve. First is upward movement, second is downward movement. Now upward movement represents the contraction in demand, that is the fall in demand due to the price rise, while downward movement is an indicator of expansion of demand. That is, there is an increase in demand due to the fall in the prices of the commodity. Now come, let's discuss the upward movement and downward movement with the help of a diagram. So here is a demand curve. P is price, Q is quantity demanded, and A is the equilibrium point. Now, if the price of the product changes from 100 rupees to 120 rupees, then it will affect the quantity demanded and the curve will move upward. As you can see, as the price of the commodity increases, the quantity demanded decreases. So there is an upward movement in demand curve. Now, if the price of the commodity changes from 100 rupees to 60 rupees, then the change in the price will lead to the downward movement of the demand curve. As you can see in the figure, as the price of the commodity changes, the quantity demanded increases automatically, and there is an downward movement in the demand curve. Now let's discuss shift in the demand curve. When the demand of a product or service rises or falls due to change in the factors like income of the consumer, price of related goods, consumers' expectations, changes in taste and preferences of consumer, etc., then there is a shift in demand curve. So shift in demand curve causes because of non-price determinants. Now there are two types of shift in demand curve: leftward shift and rightward shift. The leftward shift in demand curve indicates the decrease in demand due to factors other than price. So if there is a fall in the demand of the commodity, it is called as leftward shift. And if there is a rise in demand of the commodity, then there is a rightward shift. Now we will discuss this leftward shift and rightward shift with the help of a diagram. So here is a demand curve. This is the price of commodity P. This is the demand Q. Now if there is a rise in the income of the consumer or the price of complementary goods falls down, then there would be an increase in the demand for the commodity, which will appear like this. That is, there would be a rightward shift in the demand curve. In this case, the whole curve will shift rightwards. And suppose if the income of the consumers falls down or the price of the complementary goods goes up, then there would be an leftward shift in demand, which would appear like this, showing that there would be an decrease in demand due to the non-price determinants. So here one thing is to be noted, that the price of the commodity remains constant at all the levels, but the demand for the product changes with the change in the non-price determinants. Now come, let's discuss the difference between movement and shift in demand curve. The first difference is, the movement in demand curve takes place when the changes in quantity demanded are associated with the changes in the price of the commodity, whereas the shift in the demand curve occurs due to the changes in determinants other than price, that is, consumers' expectations, changes in taste and preferences, changes in the income levels of the consumer, change in the price of related goods, etc. So in case of movement in demand curve, it represents the changes in the price of the product itself. But in case of shift in demand curve, it represents the changes in buyer's demand for the product. Next, in case of movement in demand curve, the change is along the curve. That is, there is an upward or downward movement in the demand curve. But in case of shift in demand curve, there is a leftward or rightward shift in the demand curve, which causes the change in the position of the curve. Next, the movement in demand curve results in the expansion or contraction in demand for the commodity. The expansion of demand, as we have already discussed, it is the increase in demand due to the fall in prices of the commodity, whereas contraction of demand is the decrease in the demand due to the increase in prices of the commodity. On the other hand, the shift in the demand curve represents the increase or decrease in the demand due to the change in factors other than price. Lastly, while movement in demand curve represents the change in the quantity demanded of the commodity, it is one of the most important differences. That is, suppose when the price of the commodity is 5 rupees, the quantity demanded is 100 units. But when the price is 10 rupees, the quantity demanded changes to 50 units. So the quantity demanded changes in this case. But in case of shift in demand curve, there is a change in demand for the commodity. As in, when the income of the consumer rises, he shifts to better quality products or branded products. So there is a shift in the demand of the consumer. Okay friends, this is all for this video. Now if you want to study the topic in detail, you can visit our official website, that is keydifferences.com. Here you can find a detailed comparison of movement and shift in demand curve along with their definitions and a description of their figures. Links are also provided in the description below. So friends, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please like and share this video. And if you have any queries or feedback for me, don't hesitate to comment below. And guys, please subscribe our channel and press the bell icon to never miss another update from Key Differences.